Hiyo gamers, this video is about Baizhu, a forgotten character that's just now being talked about again more recently due to Fontaine's healing meta. Which is a good thing because in this video, I will be showing how Baizhu is actually a very unique healer by having many builds and hidden utilities that many people don't explore or talk much about. Consider this video an updated guide on Baizhu, since there will be many guide makers who will just simply not update their original guide on Baizhu. That's okay. That's where I come in. This video uses Baizhu builds that are actually curated by a Baizhu main who's tested him extensively, forced him into teams, and constructed unique ideas for teams on multiple accounts with varying constellations. If you aren't open to the idea of thinking Baizhu is a good character and just want to write in my comments your incorrect opinion, then it must be a bitter pill to swallow for you. Just continue using Yao Yao and leave this video. This is not for you, I don't care about you. Sorry, that was a bit rough. Well, anyway, back to it. Baizhu is the only Dendro healer that will be a limited 5-star that does what he does. He is flexible enough to either replace or be slotted alongside other Dendro options in a team. Especially in this meta of healing and losing HP, Baizhu is much more worth it to go for instead of Farina constellations if you get Farina and you don't have him. Though that part depends on your account, I can't tell you what to do or what you need. But I can just enforce Baizhu propaganda until you crack. Baizhu is not an HP bot. He has a total of 4 main build archetypes that I'll be talking about in this video. And I'll be talking about artifacts, weapons, and playstyles in a team as well, but not too much. So stick around to get informed, and send this video to any other Baizhu fans or people hesitant on Baizhu, as this video is really only for people who are open-minded, not toxic Genshin cells. Let's begin by talking about the 4 main archetypes of Baizhu's builds. I will only list artifact options and not talking about them in detail unless it's relevant. The first is HP and ER. This is the straightforward build, but the most boring option. But I will mention that there is a time and place for a build like this. The second is an EM stacking build, using as much EM as possible in a team that creates a burning aura, for example. Baizhu is the best character to consolidate healing and dealing a lot of burning reaction damage while upholding the burning aura. This is for teams that do not need Dendro reactions or buffing said Dendro reactions and have an on-field cryo character, for example. And with certain weapons, his healing is not sacrificed as much. Sorry. The third build is a hybrid build. My preferred build that focuses on a ratio of 30k HP and 500 plus EM. A happy medium of elemental mastery and HP stats. This can be either a lazy build where you can slot Baizhu into almost any of the previous archetypes and do the best of HP and elemental mastery builds. I'll touch on why this is my favorite later on, but just know that it's, very good. And the final build is a crit DPS build. But just like the HP one, there is a time and place for it. And spoiler alert, you won't want to build Baizhu for a hyper carry form unless you have him at C2 or higher. This will be a focus on a sub DPS Baizhu, sort of a hybrid between crit and elemental mastery hybrids. I'll briefly mention as the reasons why he struggles into a main DPS role in this section if they aren't fully self-explanatory, but just know that this is a sub DPS hybrid crit role. With all those archetypes out of the way, I'll mention the different playstyles he has and which are viable with each build in those sections, those being quick swap hybrid, fully off-field, and on-field being a Dendro driver. If this video sounds interesting already, give this video a like, and be sure you share it with any Baizhu enjoyers, and let's get into the builds. I'll first talk about each weapon that Baizhu can use for all these builds, so I don't talk about them too much multiple times. We have Prototype Amber, Favonius Codex, Tales of Dragon Slayers for the HP and ER builds primarily. Then we have the more interesting weapons, focusing on the more hybrid playstyle and build archetype of Fruit of Fulfillment, Wandering Evenstar, Sacrificial Fragments, Sacrificial Jade, and Hakushin Ring. And then the 5-star options we have Thousand Floating Dreams for EM and hybrid mostly, his signature weapon for pretty much any build, but mostly for HP focused ones. Then Tome of Eternal Flow, and Kagura's Verity for DPS options for both on or off field respectively. Familiar with these weapons? If you're not, don't worry, I will go over some of their great synergies and passive effects in certain situations when they are needed. So let's get into the build archetypes in detail alongside their use case and special synergies. The first is the HP and ER one, the standard build of using the weapons of Prototype Amber for his own energy regen, and Favonius Codex for more flexible energy battery support. Not to mention his own HP percent weapon, and Kokomi's weapon. I forgot in recording, but not in the infographs. Notice how I didn't mention the Prototype Amber's healing passive effect? I honestly think it's negligible. He overheals a lot. The sheer amount of healing he does with this build is why he's considered a great healer, but it's a lot of overhealing, which is why I think that this build is wasted in cases where he does not need to heal as much. Quick swap focused Hyperbloom and Burgeon teams can use this build decently well, as long as you can count to 6 seconds in your head, but honestly, why would you want to do that? You could be missing out on what makes Baizhu great if you don't have the right team or playstyle to work with the 6-second quick swap. This build is good though for on-field DPS characters who benefit from Dendro Reaction buffing their damage, but that's only in Quicken, so that's pretty much just 2 elements, Electro and Dendro. But those are basically the times and places for the HP build. Bottom line, this starts to show the cracks in why this build should not be his standard build, and just be an option. Speaking of option, I forgot to put the artifacts in my recording sections, so you get them at the end of each section alongside their weapons as a recap, so there you go. So, with that said, and I know that was a short section, but it's pretty obvious and you should know the meta already, let's move on to the Elemental Mastery build section, where I'm going to be popularizing a trend called Burning Baizhu. Well, you know what? Baizhu is actually the closest thing we have to a burning related support when built correctly. Yes, he buffs burning reaction damage, but that's not what I mean. You will be wanting to run EM Elemental Mastery completely in a full EM build, since we are not buffing Dendro reactions in these teams at all. Said EM weapons that would work best are Nahida's Catalyst, Sacrificial Fragments, and Wandering Evenstar in that order. Mapamari can work, but the damage bonus is just wasted. Just throw that book away. One surprising weapon that can actually work, but I don't really know where it would fit here, is Fruit of Fulfillment. You don't need attack in a full reaction build, which is what you lose in the passive, but you gain a lot of elemental mastery, and you have an ER substat that's pretty sizable. However, I wouldn't refine this weapon past Refinement 3, as the added 6 EM from Refinement 5 is such a small increase that it just doesn't matter. So use Fruit of Fulfillment if you have it leveled, or are bored. When built in a full EM build, as I mentioned in the summary, you don't need his Dendro reaction buff in a burning related team. And that's not the only team you can run EM Baizhu in. You can run him in something like Fridge, where he has Bloom Cores as a good additional set of damage, while running an on-field Cryo who does not need Dendro reactions themselves, and maybe just needs the healing. Hello, Risley. Of course, the Burning Aura Cryo Melt variant of this team can also use the same idea, but instead Baizhu is dealing and triggering burning reaction damage and the aura for the Cryo character to melt. Hi Risley, yet again. And then even a proper burning meme team, which I don't know how much of a meme it could be, but you can try either a core of Venti and Dia for off-field full crowd control burning with quadratic scaling, or a build of Kazuha and Lenny for an on-field mono pyro team. Remember, Anemo can shred burning reactions pyro damage or pyro resistance, by the way, so the added pyro damage can add up from burning. I think it's just so funny. I wouldn't recommend any Bloom variants that are not Cryo or Fridge, since I would rather be in the hybrid build for those, but if you add Electro in a Cryo Fridge team, then that's just fine. It's just the Bloom variants like Nilo Bloom that I wouldn't recommend for full EM, because there are better characters for that. I'll admit it, Baizhu can't do everything. What do you want me to say? Anything else? So for the main playstyles for this build, you can pretty much do all of them depending on the team you're in, though I would mostly say off-field is pretty much the best for cryo and burning, and you can do on-field and quick swap for burning teams as well, but off-field is generally the best. Now let's get into my favorite build type, the hybrid archetype. Now don't get scared, but let's first get into it by doing some small math. I promise it's not going to be that bad. Hi, so one more thing, I don't know where this is going to go in the video, but this is very important. I've been seeing a lot of talk about Baizhu's energy recharge requirements, and that he has to run Favge or Prototype Amber. No, literally just look at Sacrificial Fragments and tell me that's not a good weapon. Tell me. Tell me that you're missing on the HP and it's not a good weapon. Tell me that your substats on Deepwood or whatever are not as lucky as mine on Only Males. Like, it's possible to get 170 or 160 energy on Baizhu with Sacrificial Fragments, and you can get energy with his burst every single rotation. As long as you kill a couple of enemies or your team generates a decent amount of energy with like sacrificial weapons, you don't need Baizhu on ER Sands or Prototype Amber or Favonius for that specific, like, oh, he's bad without energy. That's all I wanted to say, because that makes me mad. So literally just look at the proof, okay? Use Sacrificial Fragments. The thresholds I mentioned in the summary were 30k HP and 500 plus Elemental Mastery. This is a super easy amount to achieve if you have him built in these two distinct ways. Double EM main stat artifacts with 1 HP piece and then an EM weapon. Remember, HP substats are still needed here if you need the 30k HP. And then the other build option is more focused on HP with double HP, 1 EM, and the EM weapon. Basically, no HP weapons, unless you go triple EM on every artifact main stat, and the HP weapon can get you close or at 300k HP. I honestly just wouldn't recommend it either way though, as I think Elemental Mastery weapons are actually better than HP ones. Yep. I said it. Now here's why, and the math. 30,000 HP is the threshold where you won't be missing out on much of his Dendro reaction buff. Missing 20k HP is only losing 40% of the bloom and burning oriented damage at 60% out of 100% max, and losing 16% of the spread and aggravate damage being 24% out of 40%. Those values are really not that bad. And that is if you have 30k HP and not a couple thousand extra from substats. The EM weapons I would recommend are Sacrificial Fragments and Wandering Evenstar. You can also run Fruit of Fulfillment here too if you need the ER, but this is more if you are using Baizhu for the buffer role to gain greater access to Elemental Burst uptime. Though, something I've noticed about Genshin players is that they have such a hyperfixation about maximizing a character's stat or passives, especially ones that involve max HP. They are very phobic of Baiju's max HP. You don't need 50k HP all the time. Missing a little damage percent is literally the only con of hybrid builds. Just run Sacrificial Fragments, level it up, refine another one. It's such an easy task. Who else uses Sacrificial Fragments a lot? Sucrose? She doesn't need it? Or just make another Sacrificial Fragments. It's absolutely my preferred and favorite option. It gives Baizhu an extra skill charge for more burst healing, more AoE application on his skill, more Dendro particles for himself or Dendro characters, does your taxes for you, cooks you dinner. People need to know! Sacrificial Fragments is just so good, where it has so much added utility that it beats Prototype Amber for its utility. I said it. Eat my butt. Wandering Evenstar is great too, but it lacks the fun factor and the Swiss Army knife that Sacrificial Fragments has. It buffs attack based on Baiju's EM, making EM actually mean something other than his own damage. But this weapon is unfortunately really good at high refinements only for Baizhu. You can use this weapon on other characters though and get more out of it. But you can use his weapon on weird little situations like a fun Lenny team. I don't know. Going back on track. You can see why I love this EM hybrid build so much. You can be lazy with it, keeping him on 4-piece Deepwood and just having his stats work with almost every single team that doesn't require critical hits, which is the final section. But this section will be short for obvious reasons. Here is the crit-focused build. But Baizhu's DPS is low, unless you hit C2 for constellations. Minimum. That's a hard truth, and it's a hard truth that I had to face while collecting footage as a C0 Baizhu. It's not main DPS material unless you're crazy enough to do it, which you are, my friend, if you do that. I care you. There are some weapons, though, that can make this playstyle work and compromise some of the sacrifices you take, as this is a hybrid playstyle but on the crit end. But there's also only 3 types of teams that can make this work, and they have one thing in common: electro characters. Quick and Aggravate, Quick and Spread, and Hyperbloom variant teams. Baizhu, of course, needs to deal spread damage to deal most of his crit damage here, but did you know that he has 0 ICD, internal cooldown, on his burst? That's why his Constellation 6 is so nutty and why I made a video on it. He has no cooldown on each Dendro shot when his shield breaks. It's pretty insane, but it also means he can apply Dendro really easily with his burst without dealing spread damage too. The only weapons I'd recommend in this build are any of the limited 5-star weapons. Sorry, standard catalysts, they're just bad and not good for Baizhu. But there are 2 4-star weapons, both having Sacrificial at the start of its name, Sacrificial Fragments, and Sacrificial Jade. In theory, Sacrificial Jade at R2 can be close to Prototype Amber's HP % substat while granting Baizhu some elemental mastery and crit rate. I'm saving my final verdict on a video later that I have planned about making Sacrificial Jade DPS Baizhu, but theoretically, it is a good crit weapon for his sub DPS potential while having the HP to buff his team and heal. However, I tested the passive of Sacrificial Jade, and it does indeed continue off-field. You just can't stay on Baizhu longer than 4 seconds when you swap him on the field. He has this little icon in his party menu, which I didn't even realize you could get icons like that. And 4 seconds is plenty for his rotations, so you're good anyway. The only issue is running into energy problems. That's why I recommend 4-piece Emblem artifact set, specifically only though for Aggravate teams who don't need the Dendro Shred from Deepwood, but it grants energy recharge for Baizhu's Elemental Burst and increases its damage while allowing you to run energy recharge Sands without losing much damage. If it makes it any easier, Emblem for Electro, Deepwood for Dendro in the Quicken teams. They are so clear-cut that I don't know what else to tell you. Though you can also break the rules a little to just run Nahida or another Dendro off-field character on Deepwood while keeping Baizhu on 4-piece Emblem, and you could maybe get quite a lot out of that. But again, Sacrificial Jade is really only good at R2 and higher at that point, and if you're not using it on Nuvolette. So if you're using it on Nuvolette, it doesn't matter, don't use this build. There are plenty other builds, and the hybrid build might be better for you. So those are my builds and fun facts about Baizhu and his synergies. Of course, I put background footage of his synergies, playstyles, and other teams in the background. But yeah, let me know if you had any fun interactions with Baizhu, fun teams that I didn't show off or mention, any of your experiences, and be sure, of course, to give this video a like and subscribe for more Genshin and Baizhu related content because I love Baizhu, I'm a dimp for him. And overall, I will just say the Elemental Mastery hybrid build using Sacrificial Fragments has been my favorite choice this whole time, and I've really wanted to make this video to show how much this build is so underlooked, and maybe I'll make a YouTube short about it, I don't know. But if anything, just know that Baizhu can have multiple builds that can have different focuses in different teams, and there's a time and place for each of them. And it's about a time and place for artifact loadouts. Well, anyway, be sure to share this video to Baizhu enjoyers and hesitant people alike. Make sure that you're open-minded, and I'll catch you in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-o!